Hello, and welcome back to the economics of everything. This week's topic is coffee. Coffee has become an integral part of our everyday lives and our economies. More than 25 million producers rely on it worldwide for a living, and more than 2 billion cups are consumed in the world every single day. Coffee is also one of the most traded legal commodities in the world and is the backbone of numerous developing countries. This is a 5-part series, and today's topic is the economic history of coffee. Coffee was first discovered in the Islamic world around 800 AD. An Ethiopian goatherd named Kaldi noticed that his goats became restless and manic after feeding on some red berries. He thought them to be magic berries, but his local monastery did not believe him and threw them into the fire. An aromatic smell soon filled the room, and unable to resist the temptation, the monks crushed the beans and added water to it. To their surprise, they felt a rush of energy after drinking it. And thus began a long and intricate relationship between mankind and the coffee bean. The original definition of coffee means wine, from the Yemeni term kava. This then turned into the Turkish kahve, which then became the Italian caffè, and that is how we got coffee. By the end of the 16th century, coffee was known and enjoyed by many in the world. To cash in on this, the Arabs tried to keep it a monopoly by roasting and grinding any coffee that was exported. This worked until 1616, when a Dutch merchant stole a few coffee seeds and sneaked them back to the Netherlands, where they were stored safely in the Dutch botanical garden. The Dutch started to now build coffee plantations in their colonies like Indonesia and Java. Now, the coffee market was a duopoly, and the Dutch were also becoming quite rich. Coffee was causing quite the stir. Until the 17th century, people drank beer in the morning. That's right, beer. This doesn't really make you productive. But now, here comes coffee, a drink that not only makes you awake, but it also fills you with energy for the entire morning. Woo! Here we go! Drinking coffee greatly improved the quality and quantity of work done. This wave of productivity also manifested itself in the form of the Industrial Revolution. Beyond simply topping the breakfast menu, coffee houses were also all the rage. People went to coffee houses to inform themselves, to meet people, discuss news, literature, poetry, politics, science, societal issues, revolution, and more. It was like the very first version of the internet. Banks and stock exchanges were opened in coffee shops. Coffee was really causing an economic boom. In 1714, the Dutch gifted the French a bag of coffee seeds upon signing a New Deal, and the French rushed to plant it in their royal botanical garden in Paris. The French were eager to start their own coffee plantations, but a young colonel named Gabriel de Clio stole some of their seeds and took it to the Caribbean. Over 18 million plants grew in Central and South America, all coming from the few seeds that Gabriel took along. This became very profitable for the French, and they eventually forgave him. Now, the Brazilians were also interested in planting coffee. So in 1727, they sent a colonel to French Guiana. While the governor was not willing to share, the colonel used his Brazilian charm to seduce the governor's wife. Upon his departure, she secretly gave him fertile coffee seeds. And now, Brazil was in on the coffee boom as well. To understand how Brazil rose to the world's largest coffee producer, check out this video. While coffee was spreading in Europe, the Americans were not really convinced that it was indeed better than tea. When King George III imposed heavy taxes on the American settlers for their tea, they said to themselves, "Screw it, we're going with coffee." In 1773, the Americans destroyed shipments of tea in protest. This little tea party, also known as the Boston Tea Party, led to the War of Independence. Coffee became one of the most sought after beverages to drink, one of the most sought after goods to trade, and coffee plantations were one of the most profitable crops. And while there are many factors that drive coffee's growth, 3 waves of coffee have been identified that have changed the industry and its priorities. Let's take a closer look. The first wave of coffee was to grow coffee consumption. It was about making coffee accessible to everyone. Making coffee used to be a tedious and time-consuming process, but the first commercial coffee companies like Folgers and Maxwell House changed all of that. With the invention of vacuum packaging in 1900 and instant coffee in 1903, fresh coffee could be bought and made easily at home. Coffee also became an important part of soldiers' daily food rations. This increased demand gave rise to coffee brands like Nescafe. More people were drinking coffee than ever, but to reach a wider audience, the quality of coffee had been lowered. With the rising popularity of coffee and coffee houses, people were craving coffee houses that provided a higher quality of coffee. The second wave of coffee happened in the 1960s, when both Peet's Coffee and Tea and Starbucks opened their first stores. They promoted dark roasted coffee made from high quality beans, and the improved taste was nothing short of mind-boggling. This movement led to the creation of so-called specialty coffee in 1978. It was a new philosophy that understood and valued high-quality coffee, a movement that created words like barista and latte, and also gave birth to the Specialty Coffee Association in 1982. The SCA defined a long list of qualifications that coffee beans had to fulfill to be considered specialty. I'll link their website in the description. These coffee houses weren't merely the solution to a quick caffeine fix. They were selling an experience. Coffee houses were the place people would go and unwind, relax with friends, or go on a first date. However, consumers started to complain that these coffee houses were using their brand and marketing to shift the focus from coffee to the experience. Wanting to bring the focus back to the actual coffee and not the mere experience, connoisseurs began defining and describing the unique qualities of specific coffee beans, like the climate, the altitude at which it was grown, the soil, and so on. Third wave coffee roasters and coffee companies, as they were called, like Stumptown or Intelligentsia, committed themselves to education and transparency about the production process and origin of coffee. They devoted themselves to teaching consumers about where their coffee came from and how it was made. Companies started to emphasize sustainable farming methods and fair trade. In just over 2 centuries, coffee had gone from being a commodity to a luxury item to an artisanal product. Sustainability was a big topic in coffee because the Green Revolution brought about many changes. See, coffee used to be farmed in the shade of trees. This really improved the quality of taste, as these beans took longer to grow and matured more slowly, letting natural sugars increase. It was also grown without the use of any chemicals, pesticides, or fertilizers. The shade also increases the biodiversity around the coffee farms, and the fruit trees provide additional income and food security for the farmers. The Green Revolution, however, got rid of the shade and biodiversity and used excessive chemicals that sped up the process and increased yields. Problems such as deforestation, pesticide pollution, habitat destruction, and soil and water degradation became common in coffee farms. However, the increased awareness has made shade-grown coffee a more premium product and can often earn a premium price. As coffee became an integral part of everybody's everyday lives, a coffee crisis was a real threat. To prevent coffee crises, an international coffee agreement was signed in 1962 to maintain exporting countries' quota and keeping coffee prices high and stable, and to protect farmers from fluctuations in the market. It was signed for 5 years and was renewed after its expiration. In 1977, a failed harvest in Brazil led to a shortage in coffee, driving up the prices of coffee worldwide. The East German government, for instance, was forced to pay 5 times the sum of money for the same quantity of coffee, and they were forced to exchange weapons and trucks for coffee. In 1989, an agreement could not be reached, and the ICA was not renewed. Coffee prices were not controlled. However, several years of bad weather resulted in less coffee. This lower supply of coffee kept driving coffee prices higher, which encouraged more farmers to start plantations. But it takes at least 2 to 4 years for a plantation to start producing at its optimum efficiency. All of this built up until the early 2000s, where a streak of good weather resulted in an unusually high supply. Coffee prices dropped by 70%, from $1.50 per pound to 46 cents per pound. Farmers suffered heavy losses. Thankfully, the ICA has been reinstated and initiatives such as fair trade have been launched. The idea of fair trade is to pay a premium on coffee so that the farmers are guaranteed a floor price. Most of fair trade's farmers come from Latin America. To see the ethical aspects of coffee and how much the farmers are getting, check out my friend's video on this topic. And that's the economic history of coffee. Check out the next part of this series on coffee, the economic importance of coffee. As always, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, and if you want to see more economics related content, please subscribe to my channel. See you next time.